In our last episode, we told you how the uplabeling scam works. And here's where it actually happened. In 2002, a 16-year-old liver transplant patient in Deer Park, New York was prescribed 40,000 unit per milliliter Epigen to treat his post-operative anemia. At least that's what his bottle said. What he actually got was 20 times weaker. So how did this happen? A few months earlier, a small pharmacy in Miami had bought 110,000 vials of low-dose Epigen from a licensed and reputable wholesaler. But instead of selling them to patients, the vials were then sold to a counterfeiter. The temperature-sensitive vials were transported in paint cans to the trailer of an operative who left them to soak overnight. The next day, the old labels were rubbed off, the new ones glued on, and the vials magically became high-dose Epigen. Criminals who had secured wholesaler licenses in the lax Florida pharmaceutical wholesale market sold and resold the vials, with every vendor making a little bit more money and making it almost impossible to trace. They finally ended up at a small wholesaler in Arizona, 7 states away. They sold them back to the original wholesaler in Florida who'd sold those vials to the small pharmacy in Miami in the first place. Only now, the original wholesaler thought the vials had a much higher dosage and were way more valuable. The newly acquired vials were put with the same stock as the rest of their high-dose Epigen from the manufacturer, and then all of it was sold on to a national pharmacy chain that distributed them across the country, which is how a 16-year-old transplant patient in Deer Park, New York ended up with them. For 8 weeks, this poor teenager endured injections that left him screaming and doubled over in pain because the medicine was not doing its job. His doctor was mystified, as was his family. As law enforcement unraveled the scheme, the FDA issued a counterfeit warning, and then the young man's pharmacist called and all the pieces came together. At this point, the family father became a one-man monsoon to obtain justice for his son, testifying in Congress and inducing legislation to be created. Each of the low-dose vials sold for $25, but after they were uplabeled, they were worth $470 each, which means that this scheme was worth $46 million. And they did a great job. Except for 2 tiny degree symbols on the vials, they did almost perfect labeling scam. The scandals from this era are why Congress created the Track and Trace program, which allows us to see exactly who has handled a medicine all the way back to the factory floor. Nowadays, a trackable number is put on every bottle of medicine that's made for the US market, and that number is recorded at every step for everybody who handles it until it gets to your pharmacist. In case you're wondering, Canada doesn't have a track and trace system, and Europe's is not interoperable with the US, which makes the idea of importing finished products from pharmacies in those countries inherently dangerous. Next time, we'll talk about some Canadian criminals who've gotten very, very good at fake medicine packaging. If you like our videos, go ahead and click subscribe and you'll be notified when that next one comes out. And if you want to see other explanations of counterfeit scams, go ahead and click this playlist here and you can see some of the other ones we've explained. See you next week.